Hi folks, Chris Mask from Eastland Community TV's Off the Chip Wagon, food sport competitor, Broken Antler Barbecue. That's my little project here in the Sudbury area where we go and compete not only on the Canadian barbecue society scene but down in the United States as well. I'm a foodie basically that likes to cook, so any chance to talk about cooking, hey, I'm game for it. And when the library services here in Greater Sudbury asked me to be a part of these cooking demos, yeah, I'm all over it. So this is actually number 3 for me in my series, and with the imminent arrival of spring, let's talk about lamb. Spring lamb, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. This is a protein that has been cooked around the world for over 10,000 years. But here in North America, we were a little bit late to the show because we only really have documentation that lamb was being cooked here in North America dating back to the early 1900s. And that has to do with the animal actually being brought over from Spain to be farmed, and pretty soon they realized that we can do more than make sweaters and toques out of these things. We can eat them with mint jelly. Delicious. So where does the name mutton come from? Because often people will interchange, lamb with mutton. Well, number one, it doesn't put the image of the cute little baby lamb in your head if you're calling it mutton, right? What's a mutton? Well, it's actually Latin multone, which when you figure that and then couple it with the Vikings, yeah, I know the Vikings play into eating lamb. When they were conducting their raids over in Europe in like 1066 and ravaging the English countryside, there were a lot of different societies, cultures, and languages which got melded together. So while the Old English still called it a sheep, the French were calling it a mouton. So once you kind of combine all that together, that's where we get the term mutton. And that describes the meat that you're actually eating. Actually, you want to break it down even more, we can talk about like an old lamb versus a young lamb, much like how it's beef from a cow or veal if it's coming from a calf, right? But we won't worry about that. What we will worry about, though, is how to cook it properly. You need to know your protein. That's what it comes down to. There's no bad cuts of meat, it's just people are bad at cooking certain cuts of meat. So know what you're getting into. Something like a chop, this is where you're going to go hot and fast. Something like a shank, you're going to braise that more. You see, adding heat to any kind of protein out there is going to create an effect. And the effect that we're looking for here is the breakdown of the proteins, and basically we're looking to turn something that is very soft and raw. All meat basically is soft and tender when it's raw. But once you add that heat, we want to get a surface crust. Fancy term for that, the Maillard effect. And that's about the breakdown of the proteins, caramelization of sugars, blah, 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 blah. But it's too sciencey. We won't bother getting into that. When we're adding high temperature, basically that surface, that crust that we want to form on there, that's what's going to lock in the moisture and keep the meat tender and delicious inside. If you're going low and slow, like you would do with like a brisket, or in this case with lamb, I mean something like lamb shanks, there's certain cuts of meat that are just much better when you make them into a stew. If you want to roast it, whatever, that low and slow effect is going to allow for those proteins basically to tighten up, but then gradually over time relax and break down. That's where the slow cooker comes into play, right? Whether you want to try the Instant Pot pressure cooker. I mean, there's lots of ways to make lamb, right? There's chops, there's roast, there's stew. I mean, you can shawarmaize it, turn it into donair. You can make meatballs out of it. It's endless possibilities. You just need to kind of open up your mind and your palate and explore what lamb can do to you, I guess, so to speak. Now, here's the kind of quirky thing when it comes to lamb. A lot of people like it more on the raw side. But when they're saying to cook it to like an internal temperature of like 130 to 140, that might be a little too raw for some people. And I mean, Food Guide, they're saying that you need to cook it to 145, so always go safe by the Food Guide, right? Don't play around with it. Know what you're getting into by getting a meat thermometer. So one of these little thermometers here, you can pick them up pretty cheap, but honestly, any kind of meat, chicken, pork, beef, whatever, lamb, this is really what's going to help you with your cooking. Because this gives you spot on temperature. You can also use the finger test, right? So the finger test is if you take your finger, your hand like this, that would be raw. That would be rare, that's medium well, and then that's well. So what I mean by this here, these go into your little knuckle marks there, touch the back of your hand. Another way is to just check your wrist. If it feels that like you're checking a pulse on your wrist, that's basically what you're looking at when it comes to the doneness of your meat if you're doing it in a high heat method. So that's not low and slow like a slow cooker or a tangine or like a sous vide. This is like grill. And trust me, I love grilling lamb. I really do. I'm not going to go and play on the barbecue with you today, though. We're going to do this on the stove. So again, remember, no bad cuts of meat. It's just people are bad at preparing meat. So things like tenderloin, ribeye steaks, that's where you're looking at your high heat. Like those are the kind of cuts that you don't want to play around with and ruin by going low and slow. Sirloin, flank steak, I mean, that's kind of in the middle ground there, but things like brisket, shank, bottom round, that's absolutely low and slow. Whether you want to turn it into a stew, you want to braise it again, or go to that tangine. It's entirely up to you. For our demo that we're going to do today, I already mentioned how I'm going to use the stovetop, but I'm going to do a little experiment here because I want to see how this turns out. This is the first time I'm trying this, so it's either going to work or fail miserably in my face. I'm going to use an air fryer. It's all the rage in the cooking world, it seems, these days. Everybody wants an air fryer, right? Now, I have done steak in the air fryer, and I can tell you that, yeah, it actually turns out really well. But lamb? Don't know. We'll find out. We're going to do chops today. So when you're selecting your chops, there's a couple things you want to look for. One, you want to look for what's called marbling. So marbling is those little white bits of fat that you can see in the red meat. Now, fat equals flavor, but we're also going to add a nice aggressive rub to this. We'll talk about that. People say, well, I don't like lamb because it tastes gamey, or it's really stringy, or it's really fatty. That's the thing. Anytime you're cooking any kind of meat, whether this is lamb, pork chop, veal, whatever, you got to render that white fat down. So again, it comes down to cooking technique, and that's why braising and low and slow work, because it really breaks down the fat versus the high heat. But again, we'll see how it does versus the grill and the air fryer by the time we're done. So we're going to serve this here with a couple different sides, and one of the sides that we're going to serve it with is something called a wheat berry. So yeah, we're going nice and old school with this. So wheat berry, not farro, wheat berries. If you look at these things here, basically this is the wheat kernel minus the husk. And we're going to want to cook this. Some people say you want to soak them, kind of like when you're using certain types of long grain wild rice for like an overnight soak. About an hour, though, really is all you really need if you're going to do this on the stove or even in a rice cooker. You need lots of moisture to it, and you want to aggressively season this as well. This actually is also something which you might recognize if you do celebrate things like Ukrainian Christmas, traditional things like this. This is what they actually use in that porridge that they make at Christmas. What's it called? Kutia? Kutia, I think it is. Just pulling stuff out of my head right now. So, all right, so let's break it down here. Cooking temperatures when we're using things like high heat, everything is going to happen in stages. So you can't have heat that's too high because then it's going to kind of skip things. So you got to find that happy balance. It's at around 100 Fahrenheit, 38 Celsius that the protein strands in the meat itself and the connective tissue will actually start to break down and unwind and denature. And then it's around about 120 Fahrenheit, 49 Celsius there, where the water and the juices are going to start to get released from that protein itself. And then once you hit that 140, 60 Celsius mark, that's when the collagen and the connective tissue really breaks down and melt and gelatinize. And that's why when I say that, the people like theirs like at 130, if you're looking at some recipes, to 140, just get it to 145, be safe, go with the food guidelines, and really it's still going to be a good cut of meat if you prepare it properly. So with our wheat berries here, we're going to finish that off with a bit of lemon zest and some fresh herbs like parsley and mint. We're going to go and add some vegetables to this to make it healthy with broccolini. We did a whole show on broccolini as well. This was actually a Japanese invention from this century as well. And some mushrooms, because mushrooms always go good with any kind of wild game. But to really top this off and hit that home run, we're going to put something called a Romesco sauce on it. So there's a traditional Romesco sauce, which, it originated in Spain. We're going to put our little spin on this. So while we're going to stay true to it with things like the roasted red pepper, the parsley, the toasted almonds, the paprika, cayenne pepper, we're actually going to up this a little bit because all of our ingredients in here are eventually going to go into here, which is the blender. But how we're going to jazz this up is we are going to add some Calabria chilies for a little bit of heat and a little bit of extra acid. And that extra bunch of acid, not just coming from the sherry vinegar, we're going to use a banana pepper. So when you roast your peppers off in the oven, put it at about 425, and you'll start to see the skin blacken. And once it starts to blacken, you can take it out, put it into like a sandwich bag or cover it up with some foil, because then this waxy skin, you can peel it off a whole lot easier, as you can see, once they're cooled. And that right there, a nice roasted pepper, boom, it's going to go in for our Romesco sauce. Olive oil, I'll put the recipe up, you'll have it. So the other thing is our lamb rub. Now, yeah, you could do salt and pepper, absolutely, really simple. I like something a little bit more aggressive when it comes to lamb, and we have our own actual wild game barbecue spice that we put together. So I won't, unfortunately, give you that full recipe, but I'll give you something that's kind of close. And I can tell you that there's a whole lot of goodness in here. And this right here, with any of those spice blends that you're going to do, make sure you toast your spices, release the oil, make sure they're fragrant and aromatic, but don't burn them. When I talk about aggressive seasoning, though, when it comes to these lamb chops, this is what I mean by aggressive seasoning. By the time I pour all this on here, that'll be enough for like a couple chops. And remember, we're going to get one that's going to go in the oven, one that's going to go into the air fryer here. And we play around with it and say, hey, I want to go more seasoning than this. Don't forget to get the sides as well, because remember, you are going to be eating the sides. And when you're all said and done, that is a pretty aggressively seasoned lamb chop right there. Pair of them. You can make it pretty and do the French style by trimming away where the bone is down here. But again, for what we're doing, this is good. This is all we really need. Anytime you're going to do this with any kind of meat, let it air dry in the fridge, because you want to make sure that that surface is dry. There's no extra moisture in there, because that's what's going to help get that Maillard effect and that nice crust on the surface of your meat. So what we're going to do here is move over to the stove. I'm going to get the air fryer ready, get that going, and then we'll prep everything else that's got to go into the oven, because we're going to roast off our broccolini and our mushrooms. I'll let you in a little secret. I already did the wheat berries. Again, because it takes about an hour to prepare. So hang on, we'll move over to the stove and keep the fun train rolling. Okay, so we moved over to the stove, and unfortunately I'm having some camera issues, so I'm going to be hunched over a little bit. That's all right. The important thing is, you can see this. This is going to be our griddle pan. So if you don't have one of these pans with the lines where it kind of simulates being a barbecue grill, it's okay. Use a non-stick pan, that's fine. Here's a little tip. If the meat is sticking to the pan, doesn't want to move, it's not happy. Leave it there. Let it rest. It'll move when it's ready to move. That'll give you a good gauge of whether or not your meat is actually ready to flip when it comes time. And how do we know when it's ready? Well, again, meat thermometer. Best way, easiest way to go. So we'll do one in the air fryer. We're going to do one in this pan here. The important thing is that you're going to be able to use a pan that you can put into the oven. So you need something that's oven safe, just in the event you haven't hit that whole 145 temperature that you're looking for. So let's take our first chop here, again, aggressively seasoned. We've air dried it, and it should sizzle when we put it in the pan. So we're going to let that go like that for a little bit, and it'll be happy. Now, our mushrooms, we've ended up quartering them here. We put them into a pan, and these are actually going to go into the oven first. We've got some butter in there. We're going to finish that off with a little bit of fresh rosemary. Just like this. There, boom. That'll go into an oven at about 425 or so. We're going to get about a 10-minute head start before the broccolini is going to go in there. Our Romesco sauce, it's just a matter of basically hitting pulse on the blender. We're going to get that nice and smooth. We're good to go there. The air fryer, high temperature, jack it up to whatever the highest setting is. It's probably going to be about 400. Let it go for about 8 minutes total. Now, if you watch the way that Gordon Ramsay does his lamb dinner like this, using chops, he does this all in about 10 minutes or so. But again, it's going to come down to your comfort level. You don't have to rush through anything. Don't worry about it. It'll happen when it happens. And that's the thing. You'll notice that I'm kind of killing time here, because when I say it's going to happen when it happens,
I can't make this cook any faster than it's ready to cook. And that's, again, a good reason why you try to bring your proteins, whatever kind of meat you're cooking up, to a room temperature before you start cooking it, just so you're not so far behind the 8 ball. Our wheat berries, I did these in a rice cooker just to kind of speed things up. But again, you can simmer them on the stove. We'll finish that off with some mint, some lemon zest, a little bit of parsley. And that's going to be the base of our dish. Manitoulin black rice, if you can get that from Manitoulin Island when it's in season, that is fantastic as well to go along with this lamb dish here. So basically now it's just wait and see. Once you lay everything out, I mean, it just turns into a waiting game, because again, you can't cook meat any faster than it's ready to cook. Just like I can't roast vegetables any faster than they're ready to roast. Make sure things are manageable sizes and pieces so you get that kind of uniform cook, but also plan it out. If you have to, make a schedule for yourself. I mean, it takes a couple minutes to draft that up, but at least it keeps you honest in the kitchen and kind of keeps you on track as well. When it comes to doing things like food sport, sometimes you can get over-ambitious and things just don't work out time-wise. I know when it comes to doing competitive barbecue time, it always seems to be a number crunch. No matter how much we plan, there's always going to be a wild card in there somewhere, whether it's the wind, the temperature outside, the heat from your grill not stabilizing. Cooking's always full of wild cards, right? It's how you roll with the punches and make the most of it, basically. So with this here, what this is going to do is simulate grill marks for us, right? And while generally you don't want to push your meat down if you're making hamburgers, we can push this down a little bit just to make sure that we're going to get those grill marks in there and simulate that whole barbecue look for us. When we think that we've got this at a good spot and it's happy, we can do things like add a little bit of rosemary and smashed garlic, and even just the drippings that you're going to get out of this, you could use this as a pan sauce. It's entirely up for you and up to you, really, what you want to do with it. But I really like the Romesco sauce that's going to go on top of this. Have your meat thermometer ready, and you know what? Everything's golden. It all falls into place. I'll see you in a couple minutes. Okay, so our lamb has been going for a little while. Air fryer, I'm going to turn that on. I just don't want to have the noise in the kitchen right now. But when I say when it's ready to go, it'll release from the pan. If you want to get those nice cross, like thatch pattern on your meat, it's about a 90-degree turn. And I've already done that with this, and you can see beautiful crust on there. And we do have a little pattern going. So now we can flip this bad boy over. I'll try and go to a part of the pan there where it hasn't been touched, just so that we get that high heat. You can hear that sear. And now throw in our garlic and rosemary into there. The garlic's going to burn. There's no way around that. And burnt garlic is bitter garlic, but that garlic's not being served with this. The pan juices, however, I mean, you can fix that with a little bit of butter and white wine. Everything's better with butter, right? Remember, we want to get an internal temperature on this of 100 and about 40 to 145. 40 to 145 is where they actually want you when it comes to the health guidelines and standards. Again, pan gravy's nice. We're going to put the Romesco sauce. That's all sitting in the blender. Just have to wait to turn it on. Cast iron pans are fantastic. And with the summer coming up, you can probably get yourself to a garage sale. If you find up some beat up old pan in a thrift store or, again, at a garage sale, bring it home. A little TLC with some baking soda, some salt, and even a can of Coke. You'll restore it to brand new, grease it up, season it in the oven or on your barbecue, and you know what? You will have a lifelong friend. I mean, people rescue pets all the time. Why not rescue a pan? Because finding it at a thrift store or garage sale will save you a ton of money. And this is one of those items that everybody should have in their pantry. Absolutely 100%. Okay, so you can hear the whir of the air fryer in the background. You can see that our little lamb chop here in the pan is doing very well. Remember, we want to render that white fat, and if you're going to go through the hassle of grilling, give it a little turn like that. Now, our little friend, the meat thermometer, right along the bone, put that in there, take a look, see what it says. So right now, we're at about 127. But I don't want this getting much darker after I play around with this here, trying to get a sear and trying to render that white fat on the side. we'll probably just pop this into the oven for a little bit. Something else that has to go in the oven to join our mushrooms is going to be that broccolini and the Romesco sauce. I've already hit pulse, so there wasn't really much to see on that, but that's done and ready to go. You can actually, if you look closely, you can see the juices that are coming out of this here. And again, how I talk about that Maillard effect, right? It's all about that external caramelization on your lamb chop. We gotta find the camera, there it is. So that's about as pretty as that's gonna get. We'll see you in a couple minutes. Okay, so you can see our mushrooms are out of the oven. Added some butter to the pan. Our broccolini's in there, so it's gonna take up the juices that the lamb has already released. We're just gonna pop this into a 425 oven. Let that go till we hit the internal temperature of, everybody say it with me, 145. Then we'll be ready to plate and eat. So while that's in the oven, let's take a look at what the air fryer does for us. That's beautiful. So all we're gonna do, give that a little flip. You can see the other side done. Steaks really do turn out quite well in the air fryer. But we go to our little meat thermometer, right along the bone, and we'll see that we're still underdone. Still a while to go to 145. So back in the air fryer it goes. Another 5 minutes to the cook. All right, so finished product. Now, when you watch these reality cooking shows and you see contestants look really disheartened and beat up when they have to cook lamb, this is exactly why. We are talking about a game of seconds. You're lucky if it's a game of minutes, but it really does come down to a game of seconds sometime. Because here are our lamb dishes. This one came out of the air fryer, perfect, medium rare. But you'll see it didn't quite render down all that white fat, but that's all right. Beautiful crust. This is the one that came off the grill, which is medium. This was literally seconds. It was under when I went to check it in the oven. I went to check this in the air fryer, took it out. By the time I got back to the oven, this now pushed to a medium. But again, look at the crust. So you can see the differences in crust. Just one has grill marks, one doesn't. We've got our wheat berries there with our lemon zest, our mint, and our parsley. We've got our button mushrooms that were roasted in the oven with our broccolini and that Romesco sauce on top. And again, Romesco sauce, that's not quite a traditional sauce. We took it in a bit of a left turn here because we added those Calabria chilies. We added the banana pepper for a little bit of zing. Remember the basic concept of cooking: fat, acid, salt, heat, and that's all wrapped up in these dishes right here. You want to have balance in whatever you cook. So hopefully you enjoyed this. You're gonna maybe be inspired to push your palate a little bit and try some lamb. If there's anything that you want to see me play with in the kitchen, or anything that you want to see me explain even for you, by all means, reach out to the library, or you can reach out to me through social media, hashtag unmasking food, hashtag broken antler barbecue, hashtag off the chip wagon. Until then, thanks for watching. Bon appetit.